Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Alex Wall.
Wait a few minutes, a couple of seconds. No.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Alex Wall from the Churchy Library. Outside you will see the beautiful Churchy playing fields, and we are going to give you live commentary of the games between Churchy and Brisbane High. Now, the first game we're going to have a look at is we're going to see what's happening in the Board 1 clash between Jason Chan and Henry Slater-Jones. And Henry Slater-Jones has played the centre counter and Queen D8. I suspect this is preparation. And we have the normal opening set up so far. And nothing major has happened, and here we have the opening position. Let's go to the next game. Nothing much to talk about here. In the second game, also E4 is played. It seems that's very popular today. Michael Ostapenko plays the quiet positional line D4, D3, not D4, which would be the Scotch Gambit, or Knight G5. Bishop E7, C3, D5. Yeah, I think that move is slightly questionable in this position. Castles, Rook E1, pressure on the middle, Bishop G4. In this particular position, White can win our pawn by pushing the bishop away and then taking the E5 pawn. Otherwise, Black will be forced to take on F3. Be interesting to see how this develops. And on board 3 we have Patel Kush against Alex Au, and this game is also an E4 game. And it's also a center counter. And the aggressive variation. And we have a normal position here. And we are also just in the opening. Okay. And there is one more game. Our board 4. And also E4 was played. And we have the positional variation again. And White's played Knight C3. So all the games are still very much in the opening. It seems that the lads who are White have chosen the quiet Italian game.
Show me a few openings, Alex.
And our lads, and we have our spectator here, Daniel Swords, who is a chess aficionado. So we will go through some of the game with Daniel here. And this is called the Scandinavian or the center counter game. It's a book has just been written about this by our former student in Churchy, David Smurden, who is now a grandmaster and a professor of mathematics or statistics at QUT. And the only chess book I know that he's written is on the Scandinavian. So it's not surprising that this is very popular with our boys. And this variation, there are several moves here. Queen A5 is the main old line that's moving the queen sideways to the A5 square. The move which is very popular is, at the moment, recently has been moving the queen back to D6. But Henry chose a third alternative, which is not as well known, and that's to move the queen back to D8. I'm going to have to ask Henry about the special significance of that move because I haven't come across it in my practice yet. White, Jason Chan for board 1 for Brisbane High develops normally. Both sides develop their pieces, and white castles very quickly. Very logical play by white. Black develops his king side. I'm not quite sure I understand the move d3. And, well, if I was black in this position, since white did not play d4, I would immediately play c5. Pawn to c5 to take control of the c5 square, the d4 square, and then to slot in the knight behind, getting control of the middle of the board. This is obviously another plan, and to give it's not very harmful, it's just that I'm very greedy. If someone doesn't take control of the center, I want to. And one of our students has just finished. How did you go, Aaron? Congratulations. And a quick win. Hello, Sean.
Send me through on the live feed now. Alex is doing live commentary.
Right, live feed here, Henry Slater-Jones.
And we have...
How do you see, all right?
Not bad.
I saw you before, but I didn't want to interrupt. I knew you were busy with the lads.
No, that's all right. So white has developed a queen on d2, and this is just a normal game.
No, we're black.
Okay.
We're black in this game. I expect black to either castle in this position or to develop a knight, which would be two normal moves.
He's playing against the Chan man.
And now,
Oh, look at that. He's moved over there.
and we haven't gone any further in this game. I'll just run through it again. So it's bishop c4, which is the Italian game. Knight f6, d3 is the quiet variation. Knight g5 and d4 are the two much sharper variations. But our boys are playing safely and positionally. And
So we're black there too?
and we're black, and that's
We're white.
We're white.
we're white.
Oh, Austin's white. Yeah.
This name's gonna be white. This name's gonna be black.
Well, that name on the right's not black though, so what are you talking about? With that one last, is that?
So this is a slightly suspect way to play for black to me, and I would imagine in this position that white, when he does move, will just simply kick the bishop and ask it where it's going, because if it goes backwards, he's going to end up losing the e5 pawn, because white will break the pin and then take on e5, and if he takes queen takes, we're even happier, because then we have the two bishops for nothing. So we would be very, very happy about that.
Sacrificing the bishops, which is quite silly.
Well, it's different way of playing.
Okay. And Big Alex?
Black,
Yep, because we're in the right-hand side.
And just a quick run through again.
He moves there. Playing swords here that quick, Alex.
Now this is the Portuguese variation, bishop g4.
Right.
It was very popular in the 90s, and the main variation is if white keeps the pawn by pushing the bishop away, and when the bishop moves, then white can move the pawn from c2 to c4, and black will remain a pawn down, but he will have very strong pressure against white's slightly strange looking pawns. So, but the positional way to make it look a little bit silly is to play bishop e2, so that's the positional way to play. Takes,
Sacrifice.
and
then he takes pawn back.
Yeah.
and now this is actually a mistake. What he should be doing in this position is he should have taken back with the knight, but white didn't. Now, see, now this position, white makes a mistake in this position. White should castle, because at the moment he's fearing that this pawn is unprotected.
Yeah.
But if he were to just castle, he hasn't noticed that it's not good for black to take the pawn, because if knight takes pawn, knight takes, queen takes, and then this queen to b5 check.
Check. Okay.
And after black blocks somehow, then taking the pawn on b7, and the structure would be totally ruined, and he would not have been able to castle queenside.
Okay.
So defending the pawn is a complete waste of time. If he instead castles, he will then be threatening to attack the queen.
Right.
So he shouldn't. This is a bit of a waste of time. Black castles, Bishop f4, the idea of bishop f4 is to develop a piece, I guess.
Okay.
Knight h5 attacks the bishop. Now the bishop goes back, and black immediately breaks in the center of the board.
So Alex is in a strong position in that.
Alex is in a fine position because
'Cause
one of the most important things that Patel Kush should have done is castle as soon as possible. And whenever you don't castle as soon as you possibly can, you suffer, you pay the price. And now he's paying the price. His king is still in the middle and he's being attacked. And he could have castled 3 moves ago.
Okay.
And he wouldn't have been in any trouble. Remember that, Tavish? You know that, don't you? You castle as soon as you can, don't you?
Pretty much.
Our students here are all encouraged to castle as soon as they can. Oh, yeah. Hugh's a veteran. He's done that for ages.
If I don't castle as soon as I can, Alex comes over and tells
What
me.
I like about this is it's all going out on YouTube.
Oh, as we speak.
As we speak.
So nothing much has happened in this game. We still have all safety first. h3 is to stop bishop g4, and also it can be played that if black castles too early, if he castles immediately, white might choose not to castle at all, but might choose to play g4, g5 and attack the king.
Okay.
Whether it's good or not is another question. So let's cycle back to board 1. And in fact, from where we left it after black had just played c6, white developed. Black's in no great hurry to castle because he wants to see what white's doing first. White stops the attack on h2, and now black develops the other knight. He's obviously still considering whether he would like to castle queenside or whether he'd like to play on the queenside.
Okay.
I guess he's waiting to see what Jason will do.
Isn't there a conflict of interest here?
A conflict of interest? Why do you say that, Mr. Esmond? That's the other Jason.
Oh, right, okay.
Okay, and yes, Michael has of course played after thinking a long time. Now, Michael Ostapenko, who's playing board 1, board 2 in this game, as white on board 2. He's actually a seasoned tournament player. He's been playing since he's a little child, and he knows exactly when the critical position occurs in a game. And he would have noticed that after bishop g4, that black is overextended. So the good player he is, he doesn't move immediately but spends a long time at the critical moment to figure out what the best move is, and he's played the best move. Now he's waiting for black. Black has to now decide whether he wants to take the knight, giving up the 2 bishops, or whether he wants to move the bishop back, giving up the e-pawn, because white will then play g4 to break the pin, bishop g6, and then take the pawn on e5 with the knight and the rook, because it'll be attacked twice. At the moment it can't be taken because the knight is pinned to the queen, but if he moves back to h5, then white can play g4, break the pin, and then this pawn will be attacked twice and defended only once. So that's his idea. So it will be interesting to see what happens. Okay, and white has now taken on e5. So we'll have this. White's taken on e5. We assume, of course, that black will recapture. Then white will take the black knight on e5, and black will take the knight on e5. So the black queen will end up where the white pawn is, and the knights will be gone. Knight takes, queen takes. And if white then castles, black will probably play bishop to d6, threatening checkmate on h2. So, and if he doesn't, probably best for white would be to develop a piece after, to swap first and then to develop a piece. But we'll see if he does that.
Would an option be here not to exchange those?
No, not really, because then black will play knight d3 check.
Oh, gotcha.
White does have to get rid of this knight.
Yeah, okay, so it's going to happen.
And this position looks quite nice quite okay for black. But as I say, if white does a sensible thing and changes knights and then moves the knight to f3, he's got nothing much to worry about. He should be okay. Jason's game is continuing in normal fashion. Black is developing his pieces, and now white should not take the bishop, because then black would be strengthening his center, and once the black pawn reaches e6, then black is controlling the d5 and the f5 square. So white has correctly just retreated the bishop. So this is a bit of a standoff, because now if black takes the bishop, white will take back with the a pawn and open the a file. So both sides taking is not ideal at the moment. So they're both playing very well. Knight d4 is an interesting move, because white can now double up the black pawns and will have a pawn side king majority. If white had already castled, it probably wouldn't be such a bad idea, because then the pawns in front of the king would be less likely to move. Since black has done knight d4 before white has castled, white has the option of not castling kingside and attacking with the pawns. Mind you, black has the pawn majority on the queenside. So if white decides to castle queenside and attack on the kingside, black's going to have more pawns to attack on the queenside. So it's an interesting strategic decision. I'm not quite sure about it. But Adita Anand, who is playing board 4 for Brisbane State High School, is actually a very strong player. He's a tournament player. He plays in Brisbane Chess Club occasionally, Redcliffe adult tournaments, so he knows what he's doing. Now, back to board 1, and here we have this. Okay, now, here we were last, and white a3, well, it does two things. It makes sure that the bishop has a retreat square, and another idea is to play b4, b5 perhaps, and to attack on the queen side. He's not playing centrally, otherwise his pawn would be on d4, so his plan is going to be to attack on the queen side. That makes sense, and also to hide this bishop somewhere. And in fact, this is what happened, and he went back to a2. And now black has the option of posting a knight on d5, which will swap some of the pieces. Maybe that's black's idea. And whenever you swap pieces, you take a bit of pressure off the position. So as black in teams events, it's always black's job is to hold and white's job is to win. So Henry Slater Jones's job in a teams event today is to make sure that he collects half a point.
I'm not sure the boys see it that way.
Well, no, they don't. But in general, in teams events, that's. Now my computer isn't actually not. That PowerPoint is not plugged in or something.
Are you live?
Not terribly, but I've got 32 minutes remaining.
Let's have a look. Is that on now?
Yep, now it's on. Thank you. Oh, and the screen's much brighter. Okay. Yeah. And that's why they give you the big bucks, huh? Okay. May I point out that Michael Ostrapenko, his name is not spelled Ostrapenko, but Ostopenko. I don't know, whoever put the names in.
Well, you can flagellate me for that one.
Okay.
No, Hugh, actually.
Oh, well. Okay, okay, now this is a quiet move. Here, Michael decided not to go for the G4 bishop G6 knight E5 variation, which would have won an entire pawn, a whole pawn, but it would have given black counterplay typical of something called the martial defense, the martial attack, sorry. So instead he's just gone for developing a piece, and maybe he wants to chase the knight away with more subtle moves, like knight E4, knight G3, or something like that. Hugh, I've been told that you put Michael's name in, is that correct? No? Yeah, okay.
I put in the pairings.
Okay. Someone's misspelled Ostropenko, but
Can we change it?
no.
No.
No, well, we don't want to change it before at least somebody gets upset about it. So, okay. Now let's see exactly what we predicted happened in this game. After E5, the pieces came off, and now White correctly played knight to D2 before castling kingside to develop the rest of his pieces. And now Black is thinking. Black has many options in this position. Well, one of them is developing his bishop and then moving his rook towards the middle of the board, which is probably what he should do in this position, but I'm sure he's got everything under control here. And let's have a look at board 4. In board 4, nothing much has happened since our knight d4 move. Since we have some parents who have arrived who are bound to be interested to see how their children are doing. First of all, hello to Karen, Henry's mum, and we'll take you to the beginning of the game so you can see how your boy played. He has obviously played an opening which is fairly rare for him. He's usually a Sicilian player, and but in honor of or in deference to Church's Grandmaster David Smurden, I guess he's played the opening that David wrote a book on, and has played a fairly rare line. So when people play rare lines that they haven't played before, one assumes that it's something that he's looked at quite deeply.
Let's hope so.
He's a studious young man. I'm sure that he knows exactly what he's doing. And so far both sides have developed their pieces. I suspect that he won't have prepared for Jason's move d3, because that is, I'm pretty sure it's not the theoretical move, because it gives away control of the d4 square, and the pawn could have moved 2 squares immediately. To move only 1 square is, well, it's giving up the advantage of being white. Now, Henry in this position, probably the best move is to play c5, which he couldn't do under normal circumstances, but since white has not seized the center, black can. However, he didn't. He developed his bishop to make sure that he can castle first at any time, so it's slightly less ambitious, but not a lot safer. He's doing what black players should do in teams events, and that is black players try to hold and the white players play for a win. So this is how it usually is in teams competitions. Safety is more important than anything else. Don't lose. If nobody loses, your team usually wins. So at the moment both sides are still playing safe moves. 3, and after knight b6, bishop e2, and now Henry's thinking in this position. probably a move like bringing the knight from the queen side over to the center is probably a sensible thing to do. That's probably what I expect. Now,
Is the delay like 5 minutes or something?
5 minutes, I think, yes. So we have a 5-minute delay on this stream, and the reason is the same for the delays in the tournaments, and that's so people cannot take information from the commentary or from the live feed and hide somewhere behind the bookshelf with their mobile phones, find out what the best moves are, and then pass it on to the players. So we're taking extra precautions to avoid computer interference. Rook E8, Michael Ostapenko's game. And we only have 4 games today instead of our 8 games because we are trying a new technology, and this is the streaming technology, and want to get it right first before we use it on all our boards. So let us know in the comments how we're doing. So, and this, we haven't had any moves here either, and nor have we had any moves on this board. So at the moment it seems that everybody has settled down and is thinking. And here we have we posted this already? Hello, and where are we? And yes, post. Okay, so we should be live now. And yes, we are absolutely live everywhere. And yes, we're live streaming on YouTube and on Facebook. Everybody's moves here, their brilliant moves and their blunders are totally live.
Yep.
So, well, semi-live.
We need to make Mr. Well make a slip.
So let's see. So no, we haven't had any moves on any boards for quite a while. So they must have all settled down and are thinking, obviously, to see what they should do next. And no moves on this board either. Obviously, the middle game has just started. So when the middle game starts, everybody starts thinking. And also on this board, so, and on this board, so there are 2 possibilities. One is that everybody's thinking hard about this position, and the other possibility is that our feed has frozen. So it seems a bit of a coincidence that all 4 games are stalled at the same time, or that they're thinking at the same time, but it's definitely not outside the realm of possibilities because it's all hello, someone liked our video? Chess Association of Queensland. Okay, now let's have a look at Jason's game, since we have a few more viewers here amongst our public. We'll go back to the beginning of the game and show how this all started. Some games are already finished in the inter-schools, so this is a board 1 game between Jason Chan and Henry Slater-Jones. Jason Chan representing Brisbane High School, and Henry Slater-Jones, our board 1 here at Churchy. So a centre counter was played, or a Scandinavian. David Smurden, ex-Churchy boy who's now a grandmaster, is famous for and has written a book about. And as we see, both sides are playing standard moves until this point, where White has played the rather sedate d3 instead of the normal move in this position, d4. Now that white has played d3, that gives black the opportunity to play pawn to c5, but move bishop d6 is also good, and bishop e3 and c6. So black has chosen not to react to white's provocation, but is simply playing normal developing moves. And this move seems a little bit, h3 is probably not altogether necessary, but both sides are playing very, very safely. The most important thing in teams events is not to lose. a3, knight b6 attacking the important white squared bishop on c4. So this bishop hides on the a2 square where it actually belongs. And now we've had some more moves now. Knight f to d5. So black has decided to move the knight from the king side over instead of the knight from the queen side. To me, I would have been more likely to move the other knight, simply because out of the two knights, I think the one on b6 is doing less. But I haven't seen the plan yet, so let's see. So white moved the knight from c3 to e4, and now white has to watch out for, black has to watch out for this potential fork sometimes, but not yet because the bishop on e3 is being attacked. So black first moves the bishop back. Now it's interesting to see what white's next move will be. So we have had a few more in this position, and this is starting to get very tactical now. I assume that black will at some stage take the bishop on a3 and will then move the other knight to the center of the board. Black does have to be careful though that his pieces don't get subject to attack. So this game is heating up. It's getting very interesting. And Michael's game. Now let's take this one from the beginning as well. So we have the quiet variation of the Italian, and black plays the really provocative d5 in this position, which I'm sure is actually just unsound for some reason or other, though I'm not quite sure what this reason is. It would be interesting to see what black would play in after queen b3 in this position. Mr. Walker, what do you think? Do you think after queen b3 there's an easy move for black to play? d5 seems kind of premature to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, you can put this into your analysis engine at home and see what happens. Mr. Lailu, how did your game go today? Good, okay. Unfortunately, we don't have your game live, so we'll have to wait till next week to see it. Only 4 games live this week. Castles, this is Michael Ostapenko's game. Rook to e1 attacks the pawn, pins the knight which attacks the pawn. And here the big question is whether white should play g4 and take on e5 or not. He decides it's too dangerous and just moves a piece into the center, develops. Black develops the rook, plays rook e8, and the knight comes to e4. And this knight, although it looks like it's going forward, its main thing it's threatening is knight to g3, which will then be attacking the pawn on e5 twice, and black will have the same choice to take and give up the 2 bishops or to give up the pawn, but under favorable circumstances. So although this position is still perfectly okay, perfectly fine for black. Interesting move. Okay, not what I had expected. I suspect the moving the knight to b6 was actually much better, because that would have won a tempo by attacking the bishop on c4. Knight f6 now allows knight to g3, which was played, and bishop g6. Now I wonder why that pawn can't be just taken. Or can it? Now we'll have to see, because now I don't quite understand black's play, because now white can take the pawn. It's attacked twice and defended once at no cost, and in fact that's what's happened 5 minutes ago now, because we're on a delay. And I'm not exactly sure what black's thinking was behind giving up the pawn in this particular line. Maybe he wants to get martial attack type of counterplay. We'll see. He has got the possibility, he will have the chance of doubling the pawns on. No, he won't, because there's a in-between check.
Yeah.
So, mind you, there's some play. This game is going to get very sharp and exciting very soon. And now let's have a look. And white's decided to go queenside in this one. Now let's take this one back to the beginning as well, since we have some new audience members. The game started off with a Scandinavian or centre counter, whichever you'd like to call it, and the knight f6 variation, and bishop g4 is a Portuguese variation, which was very popular in the 90s actually when I was on the circuit in Europe, so I know this opening quite well. Bishop e2 is a positional line, and it's also much more recommended than the line where white tries to keep the pawn by playing pawn to f3 and c4. So this is a lot more sensible. But like I mentioned, in this position white should just castle, because if white castles, black should not take the pawn, because at the end of knight takes pawn, knight takes knight, queen takes knight, white has a check on b5, and followed by taking the pawn on b7, ruining the structure. So defending the pawn is a waste of time. And now white should castle. He still doesn't castle, and this is where he gets into some trouble by not castling as quickly as he possibly can. Every time somebody doesn't castle as soon as they can, they get into trouble. Black has castled, and therefore is already attacking. The bishop has now blocked his own e-file. So black can now play e5 and has a perfectly good position, and everything gets swapped. And now if white castles now it's a little bit late, because after bishop d6 threatening checkmate, he has to make concessions on the king side. So this is why white now brings the knight in from the queen side, trying to develop his last piece. And in fact he has to be very, very careful here not to run into trouble. White has to play very precisely now. Knight f4. What black wants to do is to get rid of his knight on the edge of the board, and also to get hold of white's dark squared bishop. And white plays queen g4 check. Probably taking it would have been better, I imagine, because the knight can come back to defend, and now it looks like a bit of a precarious position for white. Queen a5 to immediately attack the pawn. The king goes to b1, and now h5 drives the queen away. Black is it's a symmetrical position, so white should be okay still in this position. Although he's played a few strange moves, he hasn't done anything tragic yet. Queen f3, in fact queen f3 is a good move. Knight g5 attacks the queen, and it kind of involves a bit of a... Now we have to do some calculation in this position, because white can take, then black can take, and then white can take on f7, so there's a lot of... both sides can take a lot of things. So this position is now getting very, very complicated and sharp, but it's still symmetrical, so it should be more or less still even. And now Jason's position. Okay, now this game started off also like a quiet Italian game, and black is playing quietly, both sides are playing quietly and deferring the battle till the middle game, which happens very soon. So Jason Wang and Aditya Anand are both seasoned tournament players. They've often played in open tournaments, adult tournaments around Brisbane, and junior tournaments, and are both very seasoned and know that what you have to do. And one of the things you have to do is you have to use all your pieces, which they're both doing. Now this is a very double-edged plan by Aditya, doubling the pawns, and we'll see if it pays off or not. C5 defending the pawn looks like more or less forcing, and now white castles kingside. Now one thing that we notice is that on the right side of the board, if we cut the board right in the middle, white has 4 pawns versus 3 pawns. So he has what's called a kingside pawn majority. Black has 5 pawns versus 4 pawns, but the 5 pawns are on 4 files. So black is going to be playing with d5 and c4 and try to attack on the queen side, while white will use his pawn majority to attack on the king side. You always attack where you have your pawn majority, except when you don't. But let me not be too confusing. In general, that's a rule. So both sides have cast king side, and white is maneuvering his pieces over to the black king side. Black is developing his last piece. With development, people often forget the queen and the rooks. You haven't finished developing until your rooks are connected and on half-open files. Just developing your minor pieces is not enough. Your heavy pieces, your artillery, is also absolutely necessary in chess. White just goes straight up the middle of the board. And black counterattacks in the center. Now he will have to explain why f5 doesn't win a piece. There's probably some reason to do with queen moving. The queen can move to attack g3 or something, but let's see what happened instead of analyzing it. f5, Jason asks, what are you doing? And now the only move that I saw here was actually moving the queen to attack the knight, but then bishop b4, bishop d6, very complicated. But I'm sure queen c7 was the right move, because this seems to lose a piece. And black moves the queen. Jason Wang, by the way, is a very, very solid player and very reliable, and the one thing that he does do, which is a very good thing in chess, is when you see things that can be taken for free, you take them. And Jason has never seen material that he didn't like. Now in this position, now this is a fascinating position now, because now we'll see the tactical ability of both players. And okay, I was wondering why bishop f4 is not good. So d6 is, the idea of course is if the queen takes, then the knight will move with tempo. But now bishop takes is of course much better. It does mean that after bishop takes pawn, this rook will no longer be pinned, yes, and white is simply material ahead now, and will probably mercilessly swap all the remaining material. And in this position, Jason is quite merciless. Oh no. Okay. Let me just go back to this position. Now, of course, taking the rook, you would think cannot be bad. But it's breaking the rule of, it's a pinned piece, it cannot move. You can take it any time you like. Meanwhile, you might be able to attack it again. So do not be in a hurry to take a pinned piece. Make sure that your opponent can't move it or protect somehow, but if you can leave it pinned, don't take the pressure off your opponent. This is, of course, taking something that's virtually for free is not bad, but I would prefer, and now, of course, white just needs to queen f3. He'll come up with he'll swap some more things off, but basically this is a winning position for white, technically winning. Here's actually the exchange and a pawn up. However, this move, we'll be having a word to Jason about the inaccuracy of the move that actually wins an exchange. So because we're greedier than that, we want to win more than an exchange. Okay, rook to e8, this game is still continuing. And white will probably play something like bishop h6, bishop g5, or bishop f4. And just once the last piece is developed, maybe bishop g5 is the most sensible move. After the last piece is developed, white's position should just fall apart. Black's position. So let's go back to Henry's game on board 1 and see what's happened since we left there. And we left it in this position where white, Jason Chain, did not want to give up his bishop for the knight on d5 and therefore moves the bishop. Now, this is a very complicated position because black has lots of choices. He cannot swap pieces and play f6 and e5 and play for total domination of the center of the board. In fact, f6 looks like a very good move in this position because the white squared bishop either goes back into the range of the knight or moves back to h4, in which case it might get hit by g5. And, well, an attack might develop against the king. But black has decided he'd rather play safely, which is perfectly okay as well. And after the swap, it's a good question, will he take back with the queen or the knight? You can have bets on that because I think it's about 50-50. Even odds, both moves are just as good. Now let's see to the game between Michael, whose name has been misspelled, and the variation that... So the whole game has been about this pawn on e5, because black very, very early on decided to take control of the center, but left himself with a slightly vulnerable pawn. Now after knight to g3, black had the choice of taking on f3, taking the knight, and then black would have taken back, and white would have had two bishops, and black would have had an equal material but a slightly passive position. Instead, black decided to go for the attack and to sacrifice the pawn on e5 for the sake of getting an attack, which is very much like in the Marshall Gambit of the Roy Lopez. For those of you who know that is, who knows the Marshall Gambit of the Roy Lopez? Yes, we have two hands going up. Fantastic. So, in knight e5, accepting the gambit, knight takes, rook takes. Now, bishop d6 is a natural move to try to double the pawn on g3. Rook takes, queen takes. Now, this looks a little bit like a Marshall Gambit, except that white has no weaknesses at all and hasn't had to give up the two bishops. So in fact, we can safely say that white is just a pawn up. In fact, I suspect white will play something like bishop to g5. Bishop e3 is not a very good move, developing the bishop to e3, simply because then the pawn on f2 is overloaded and would have to defend the bishop on e3 and the knight on g3. So bishop e3 would be met by bishop takes knight, and after the pawn recaptures, then the queen would be able to take the bishop on e3. So we'll have to see what Michael does, but my suspicion is he'll either move a pawn forward or most probably develop his bishop, because Michael does play classical chess. He likes to develop all his pieces and put them in the center. So let's see what's new in Alex's position. And after the move knight to g5, white decided not to take the knight, but to play queen to g5, and black has defended the knight. So now we have a position that's more or less symmetrical. Neither side has much of an advantage. Oh dear. Except that if white finds knight c4, because black has neglected to connect his rooks. So knight c4 will attack the queen, and either black can now play rook takes, in which case he'll have the open d file, and there's big problems here for black if white finds the move knight c4, I think. Would you agree, Mr. Walker, or can you find a good move in this position?
No. Yeah, I think the same thing.
Knight c4 is a bit problematic, isn't it? Well, we'll see what
Who's white?
Hmm?
Who's white?
Well, white is Kush Patel. You can see that here. But you see what I mean? Because then he will make an attack on the queen. And because white has his rooks connected, it means that if black answers with rook takes rook, he'll be able to recapture with the rook. But black's rooks aren't connected because there's a bishop on f8. So this is what happens if you move pieces before you have all your pieces developed. Black's been making a few moves before every single piece is out and before the rooks are connected. That always can lead to really, really big danger. So always connect your rooks. Oh, knight b3. Okay, is knight b3 as good? Knight b3 is also okay. I don't think it's as good as knight c4, because knight c4 covered the d6 square, which is kind of very important. If he played knight c4, it means that bishop d6, the knight can always take it and completely destroy the pawn position, and in fact make this square unavailable. Knight b3 is closer to his own king, so he might have thought that knight c4, that the horse was going a bit far away from the paddock, but it's not. The horse would be quite happy on c4. The knight might want to come into d4 and into e6 as well. So on board 3, you're doing quite well. And you are dead lost on board 4. Jason Wang has, again, very efficiently brought the point home, and we'll see how he did that. Opening up this diagonal, this is where we last left it, and this is where, just in case you weren't here before, and I like to mention this because it's actually criminal to take a pinned piece. That rook cannot go anywhere. Now if the king moves out of the pin, then you can take it, but the opponent has to in fact waste a move to break the pin. So do not take once you take it, you've cashed it in and you don't have the pin anymore. So this move is actually not very good at all. But I mean, the position is still so winning that it's irrelevant, because of course Jason is just bringing all the pieces in, and as soon as you're material up, everything just comes off the board. And oops, I think rook e3 missed queen d5 check. Yep, he's starting to miss a few things. Looks like a detour is, and now he'll be in big trouble. Oh, queen d8. Okay. Now, Jason is sticking a little bit too strictly to the formula of swap everything and win as quickly as you can, because here, if he had spent some time, he would have found bishop d4, which threatens the rook and threatens mate. But as soon as, I mean, he's a rook up, so he just wants to go, yeah, let's get the queens off the board. Let's get everything off the board and win. So queen d8 is the simplest way to win. Bishop d8, and he threatens mate. I don't understand. This is Black's attempt to be funny or something. Yes. He's giving up his rooks so he can get some checks. I don't know why this game is still going. Ah. So he's waiting for the check. Okay, so Jason wanted to play a brilliant checkmate, so he allowed his opponent to make a queen, and instead of taking the queen, he checkmated him. So, sorry? That's exactly right, because, yeah, it would have been classier. Anybody can checkmate a king in the corner, but, yeah. Okay, so we have a first win. First game is over, and that's Jason Wang's game on board 4, and in fact Jason's game is usually the first game to be over very solidly. So far this season and last season, to the best of my knowledge, I don't remember Jason being in trouble. He doesn't try anything spectacular, he just takes all the material that's offered to him and wins as efficiently as possible. Board 3 and 4 is usually not so difficult. Board 1 has the hardest job of all, and this is where we left it. And in fact, he took back with the queen, so anybody who had queen on their ticket, yeah, okay, you win the imaginary chocolate. Here you go. Oh, Tyson just stole your imaginary chocolate. Queen G5, so white is just going for swapping everything off. Fine. Oh. And black decides not to swap everything off. Okay. I can't say I fully understand that decision, but it's a perfectly alright decision to make. And now E5. Okay, I'm sure he thought about this very carefully, and he needs to think about this very carefully because he has just put himself into a pin on the long diagonal, and has to make sure that moves like c4 and c5 do not actually win material. In fact, there's a very dangerous move in this position, which is c4, and after the knight moves, the knight can first of all go into d6, and if the queen takes d6, then c5 wins the queen, otherwise the bishop has to move, and it's just a cheap trick. It probably doesn't work, or it's probably not any good, but one has to be very careful when putting oneself into a pin. It may not be, but it's something that you would have to consider in this position. I suspect that white's last move actually was also quite good. You expect the top clash to be on board 1, and Henry Slater-Jones has the hardest job, because every school has a really good player on board 1. So he's been taking the brunt of it this season and has been doing exceptionally well. Now, this game is also, okay, we have bishop g5, of course, and black now played bishop g3 and hg3, fg3. Now this may seem like a good idea because it's doubling white's pawns, but what's really relevant is the 4 against 3 on the queen side, because you can't really call these 3 pawns a weakness, because they in fact give a really nice place for the king to hide on h2, and then the 2 bishops should do a good job on the other side of the board. So this is another quite safe game. In fact, of all our players, Michael Ostapenko, I didn't spell your name wrong, Mr. Ostapenko, that was someone else. We are still looking for the culprit. So, and of all the players in the team, Michael is probably the most technically capable. He's done a lot of study on endgames, it seems, in the past, and seems to aim for technical positions very often and plays them extremely well. So I don't think he'll be very worried. Here white is just a pawn up with the 2 bishops, and it's got a fine position. So to sum up, I would say board 1 is double-edged. I have no idea who I would be quite happy to play this with. Both sides just looks more or less equal chances to me. Black has a little bit more of the center, so maybe black. Then again, his knight's offside, so maybe white. I don't know. Call me indecisive. I think about equal. Here white is clearly better. He's not a lot of material up, but the opponent also has absolutely nothing for the material. And white has a pawn and the two bishops. Black has to figure out what to do about the threat on e5 first. And then queen f3 and rook over is going to create some problems on the queen side. Basically, white's more than a pawn ahead on board 2. This position, board 3, is very dubious. I believe that white has a significant advantage in this position. I'm not exactly sure what he's going to do next. I am kind of happy for black that white didn't play the much stronger move in this position, which I think is knight c4. That would have caused some problems, because if the queen went to a4, for example, then knight to b6 would have won the queen. And if queen b5, maybe even a4, but we'll see. So knight b3, rook d1, and now black absolutely cannot allow a check along this diagonal, because let's say if black plays queen to a4, well, he can't, but let's say queen to a6, well, then queen f5 is going to put some problems. Not big problems, because he's still got e6. Yeah, big problems. Queen b5. Okay. Now, there are so many good moves here for white. That is actually the problem in this position, is choosing the good move. Yeah, let's let white find out himself what he's going to play. But I'd be a little bit worried in this position. Moves like h4, I wonder where the knight's going. If it goes to e6, then queen e4 might be good. Yeah. Anyway, I think black survived the worst by white not playing knight to c4. So still a precarious position. So summing up, one game is finished. One game is better for white, one game looks like it's also better for white, and board 1 is the most exciting tussle of the round between the two board 1s, the standard bearers of the school, and Henry has of course played the correct move in this position, king h8. It's getting out of the pin of the bishop and avoiding silly tricks, and Jason has played d4, opening up the center. So both sides are playing absolutely logically at the moment. This game is going to get extremely exciting fairly quickly, I imagine, because white has set himself up perfectly for the central break. But black still has more of the center, more control, but his center is a little bit iffy. Probably black should move the a rook over to e8 so that his queen can drop back. He will have to overprotect this pawn. So I'd have to say computer assessment, if I was to make a computer assessment, I would have to say I would now prefer to be white slightly. After d4, it looks like the initiative has passed to white, but I'm not even 100% sure about that. But yes, simply because the center is a little bit fragile in this part of the board. If pawn takes, this is actually interesting. If pawn takes, then the knight would have to move first before being able to play knight takes. But the tactics Oh, no. No. He's got a very, very sneaky trick here, as Jason, which we won't go into, just in case the 5-minute delay is not enough. So, I'm trying to only mention the obvious things so that nothing non-obvious mention. Okay, well here, this game is more or less, so Queen e5 after development. Okay, Bishop f6. I do tell all my students when you material up to swap off as quickly as you can. I'm not sure I would have followed my own advice in this position because having the 2 bishops is just such a lovely thing that, I don't know, playing Queen d2 with the threat of Rook a e1 or f1 just looks to be slightly more incisive. And but this is the safety move, and one thing that Michael likes to do is he likes technical positions, Queen f3, Queen b6 and Queen f2, and now of course he has exactly what he wants, and that's, well, he hasn't got what he wants yet. What he wants is he wants to swap the rooks as well, because once he swaps the rooks, then you have a bishop and 4 pawns versus a bishop and 3 pawns. The pawn will simply, white will simply swap everything off on the queen side until he has 1 pawn left, and he'll try to make a queen with that pawn. If black tries to stop it, then he'll munch on the other pawns on the other side. So Michael is going for the simplest technical win, and now Rook e8 and a sneaky little trick. Of course this pawn is not attacked, because if the bishop were to take the pawn, the bishop could take the bishop, rook takes, and then we have something at the back called a, young man, what's that called?
Back rank checkmate.
Back rank checkmate. Very good, thank you. So, okay, so we have this position, king f8, and now white just plays d4, f6, and probably white would be happier playing the bishop ending than the rook ending, because rook endings, if all rook endings are drawn, except those that aren't. So probably black is going to try to play bishop f7 and hold the rook ending, but I don't fancy his chances much, because endings is something that Michael likes to play and plays quite well. So let's see if anything tragic has happened on this board yet. Nothing yet, and if black gets one more move in peace, he will play bishop d6 and his position will be perfectly fine. If white wants to do something, he needs to strike now, and it's more likely to be something, yes, it's white's turn, probably something like knight d4 attacking the queen. Yeah, that's a good move. Or c4, not sure which one. Let's ask our first winner, Jason. Jason Wayne, yes. Our board 4 has just come over, who is the first to complete his game. Do you prefer white or black in this position, if you had to choose? It's white's move. Ah, okay, while we have Jason here, and since he's tongue-tied, allow me to ask, now I liked all your moves up until this position. Now, my question is, why are you taking a pin piece?
Easy win.
Yeah, but I mean, is it going anywhere? Like if you play bishop g5?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, because he can't break the pin, he'll have to waste a tempo by playing king f8 or something or he'll have to threaten to break the pin. I know, it's a tiny little technicality, but just want to point it out, taking a pin piece is unnecessary. Mind you, as we saw, it was the fastest way to win, because now white just swapped everything off and won all the material. So, but I have to criticize my students for something, so the best I can do is taking material when you weren't forced to. Okay, so let's cycle through the boards again, and on board 1 we have a position where black is rightly taking his time, because this is a very complicated position, and one mistake in this type of position can lead to big problems. So black is trying to figure out the best way to handle it. Probably I would say moving a rook across to defend is probably a good idea. Just simply because the rook's not doing anything on a8 and the e5 pawn might need some more protection. Yes, and in fact from my mouth to Henry's ear, although it was 5 minutes ago, but that was the move that was played. And okay, now Michael, rook e3. I imagine the move rook e3 is played so that the king can go over to the queen side, because that's where white has the majority. That's right, so he's moving over to that side of the board, but whether that's good enough is a good question, because I don't know whether he noticed rook a6, and then when the pawn moves rook b6, then the pawn has to move again, and rook back to a6 seems to win the pawn. But oh no, then c4. Okay, so Michael has everything under control. So and in ending, so this shows that white really knows what he's doing in the ending, because he's moving his king over to the side of the board where he has the majority. He has 4 versus 3, so the king wants to come over to this side of the board, and then he's going to push the pawns. Now, because he's controlling the only open file, black can never swap the rook, because in king and pawn endings the extra pawn just wins very easily. So here we're seeing a technical masterclass. We'll see if it keeps going that way. And like predicted, now rook b6, b4, and if rook back to a6, c4. Let's see if our prediction in fact comes true. And the next move, oh no. What is the point of that move? Ah, okay. That threatens check. Ooh. Oh, that's a nasty move, in fact, that Mr. Patel has found. He's threatening checkmate, and he's threatening the pawn on a7. That's now a double threat, but there is a way to stop both. Yes, what is it?
B6.
B6, that's correct. After the move b6, that guards the a7 pawn, and if the queen does give a check on d8, the king can come to b7. So, white's move, in fact, I think it's probably almost forced, isn't it? Yeah. So probably in this position we're going to see b6 from black, because you can't see anything else, although it does allow a check. And but the whole position is quite nasty, actually. Here, yes, in fact, check, then king moves, then knight d4 is going to be extremely nasty. So yes, this position is still very, very unpleasant for black. And again, the reason is because this is why juniors, you should always connect your rooks. Look at this rook over here on h8. It's a pure spectator. All of white's pieces are coordinated for an attack, all in the middle of the board, and black's pieces are doing what? Exactly. They're just sitting around doing nothing. So, and on board 1, and we have had some developments in this game. White took, black recaptured, and now we have an interesting situation where the pawn on e5 looks like it's a little bit weak. because it cannot be defended by another pawn, so this is called an isolated pawn. However, it does control the d4 and the f4 squares, so this pawn can either be a weakness or a strength. Like if it manages to move, it can support pieces, and it can also break up the white kingside pawn structure, but we will see whether it turns out to be a strength or a weakness. At the moment, it looks more like a weakness to me, but you have to play this very, very precisely with white to make use of it. And don't forget that the bishop on e2 is also looking at nothing except the knight on this diagonal. So if white moves the pawn to chase the knight away, well, then he's blocking his own diagonal, and if he doesn't, then he'll stare at the knight because there's no other way to get the knight to move. So what in fact happened? Fe5, white hasn't found a way to... There are many, many moves for white, like knight h4, but if he plays knight h4, then he's not adding pressure to the e5 square anymore. If he plays knight to g5, then he has to explain where he's going after h6, or maybe after queen f6 as well. Oh no, there's knight g5, interesting. I'm sure that's what both players are calculating right now. That would make a triple attack on the pawn on e5, which is only defended once. So black would have to come up with some tactics. Maybe he can play e4. Although that's not threatening to take the pawn, of course, because it's pinned. So, okay, in this position, this is very complicated, so good luck to the players. I'm not going to figure it out for them. I'll wait to see what they do. Okay, so we're playing quite quickly in this position. Okay, so we got it up to here, and then white did play the move b4. Now, if the rook went back to a6, white would then move the c pawn, and the rook would be defending the a pawn. So white, in fact, moves the... black, in fact, attacks the pawn chain. Now, the next move I'm a little bit uncertain about. I don't see what's wrong with just simply advancing with the king, but white decided to take. Maybe it's to create some weaknesses. The rook attacks the pawn. Now the white pawn goes up to c4, and there is an attack on the b7 pawn. So again, very technical, but now the thing is, what we notice here is that white has a pawn on a3 and a pawn on c4 and a pawn on d4. So he has two pawn islands. If he had simply left the pawns as they were, they would have only been one island. So this is giving his opponent a chance to attack two different pawns, and in fact probably giving himself a little bit more concern than he needs to. It's still a big advantage for white having an extra pawn up, and white will probably advance to the king side, to the queen side with his king. Try to make a pass pawn. For example, at some stage he might be able to play c5 and then put his pawn on, and then his a pawn might become passed. Exactly how is not clear yet, but we'll see what Michael does. b6 is played, as we suspected, and now the very unpleasant prospect of queen d8 check is next, and then maybe knight d4, which is going to lead to a very, very nasty attack for black. So for white, well, black's getting attacked. So in this position, this is very, very dangerous and could go... What is that? Oh, okay. No. Very, very nasty move by Mr. Patel. See the point?
If the knight moves, then it's possible possibly loose if it goes to e6.
Yep, because of
Queen e4.
Queen e4 attacking the knight and threatening checkmate in one. So white's come up with a very, very clever move here. So if the knight moves, well, in fact, where does the knight move now? He has to go to f7. In fact, that's absolutely forced. We might still see queen e4 though, because then if king to b8 to protect against queen a8, knight d4 and followed by knight c6, she could be deadly. So this in fact looks extremely bad, and white is a very experienced player, plays all the time. I'm sure that he'll be able to find good moves in this position. So let's see. And here we have a technical ending. This could go on a very, very long time. Although, okay. So what white seemed to want to do is to take away from the e5 square. I guess now he could infiltrate on the e file with d5 check, king d4, and then moving his rook over to the e file. So, but very interesting is our tensest game, our most interesting game is this one, of course. So knight g5 was played, knight to d7. This game is the most complex game, as befits the station of the two players. When you play on board one, for any team you have to expect to face the best. And well, we have the best between Churchy and Brisbane High School going on right now on board one, and it is the most exciting game. So, how did the juniors go?
I think we all won, except Raymond.
Except, Raymond's still playing, yes?
I think he lost.
Okay. So, let's see. It happens. Brisbane Boys High School is a very strong school. They have many very good chess players across all teams. One of the major competitors in the inter-schools competition. And here we have, and exactly like predicted, we have the very, very solid play going on here. As mentioned before, Michael Ostapenko is technically a very, very strong player. He knows what to do in endings, and I don't think it'll be too difficult. Well, everything's difficult, but I think he knows what he's doing in this position. So, but as we can see, this match is getting very, very tight, because anything can happen. Queen f5, a very, very good move by Alexei. Reason is to take away the e4 square, because if the knight had moved to anywhere else, queen e4 would have been very nasty. He wants to avoid that. I guess he's also hoping that white might want to swap queens, which black would very happily accept, because then the position would be dead equal. In fact, black only needs one more move to be quite okay. As soon as he moves the bishop off the back rank to connect the rook, he'll be okay, but white will not give him that opportunity, I suspect, and I doubt very much that he'll be playing the move queen to d3. But you never know, I've been wrong before. So here we are in this position. Now, okay, this game could go on for a while. Like mentioned before, white has a very strong threat here, and that threat is to play rook e3 with the idea of rook e6 check and just taking all the kingside pawns. So black should probably try to play something to break up the pawns, but it's very hard to see what he's going to do about the weaknesses on the king side. The rook on the third rank is very, very mobile. The king is more centralized, and white has an extra pawn. So, and he also has very good technique. So I think this game, Brisbane High School is in trouble on board 2. We're in trouble on board 3. And board 1, as usual, is just a crazy mess. Knight to d4. A very interesting, very tactical move by Jason Chan. The bishop on f5 is now attacked, but it's more than just the bishop, it's the white squares. Because if the bishop retreats to g6, what square would he have abandoned? And when, I guess for you, if the bishop goes back to g6, e6, exactly. If the bishop moves back, then a knight can come into e6 and attack all kinds of things. Whether it works or not, I don't know, but it's definitely a concern, especially because this knight's in trouble as well. And so I'm not exactly sure what black should do. Perhaps he should just ignore the threat and play h6 and allow knight takes, rook takes. And queen f6, okay, that's the same kind of thing, but he's getting his queen off the file. So yes, queen f6 is a nice move by Henry, trying to take the pressure away. And he wants to be able to move the knight into f4 and get an attack. So this position, okay, I'll change my mind from earlier. Now I prefer to be black. I didn't really like the knights moving around without any big purpose, so now black's fine again. And black has a very clear plan, it looks like, and that's to attack on the king side by using his strong e5 pawn. That's another reason why the queen f6 is such a good move, because if knight takes, the queen is defending the knight backwards, so it means that this knight will be able to move if there's ever a rook on this file. Oh, so it did get taken, and this is the position we've arrived at. Now what's white going to do? Probably move this knight and threaten a knight fork, I imagine. Or maybe not, because black could... Yeah, black has control of all the squares. Everything is absolutely fine. White still doesn't have any major weaknesses. Maybe the pawn on c2. Okay, this is again... Yep, and knight e4 threatens the fork and covers c2. So this game again is the most exciting game of the round, and it's the game also that's unpredictable, and I have no idea who's better or who's worse, and I keep changing my mind who I'd rather be in this position every moment. So we'll just let the players make up their mind. Here we have, okay, and this is the big problem in this position. And that's that the king side is just going to get wrecked in this position. Yes?
So when Michael played the rook f3, yes, the king could go back to defend. If he had played rook e3, then stop the king from moving back, he could do a fork. Yeah,
but look, he's tricked him into... Now he goes to the e-file with a tempo. See what I mean?
Yep.
So what he's done, he could have gone to e3 immediately and threatened rook check, but instead he's lured his opponent onto the e-file because he's attacked the pawn. And now when the opponent moved to the e-file, then he went to the e3 square where he wants to be with a tempo. Now black probably should go back. Well, I don't know what black should do, but he went to f7, and now white can, if he wants to sacrifice a pawn by going rook to e6, and if that would be a bad move maybe. No, a c5. Even worse. Yeah. So I mean, Michael would have spotted that. Yeah, he's not silly, is he? So now the threat may be d6 followed by rook b6. So he only needs one passed pawn on this side to be extremely dangerous. So this is interesting to see what he's going to do in this position. Okay. Weakening, making another weakness on this side of the board. Now if pawn takes, then the rook will be able to sneak into g6 and take the pawns over here. So Michael's playing on the principle of two weaknesses. So if you have caused a weakness for your opponent on one side of the board, he may be able to defend one weakness, but you probe on the other side of the board and see how he's made another weakness on the other side of the board for his opponent. Now his rook on a4 has to defend one weakness and another weakness, which is too much. So this is actually very accurate technical play by White in this game. And now you can see I don't understand what Black's doing, because I understand what White's doing. White's just coming into g6 and then swipe, check, swipe. It's just he wants to do a Pac-Man, take everything. So he seems to have that completely under control. And also when I've seen him play endings in the past, he's not in a hurry. He's very, very happy to win slowly. Another idea might be, when the rook is on g3, and if the king comes over to defend, to play d6, pawn takes, king d5. So to sacrifice a pawn just to get his king in amongst these pawns as well. But there are many ways to convert this advantage. I'm interested to see what Michael actually does. Now this is the most precarious game that we've got. And okay, here we have it. So here both sides are playing with tactics. Now Black in this position, instead of moving his knight to e4 or something, which looks like a sensible move, knight e4, decides to make a tactical threat instead. Now if pawn takes knight, he wants to play rook to d8 and create a skewer for the queen, and then be able to take the rook on d1. So he wants to play a skewer. But Kush now attacks the knight and attacks the a pawn and threatens check. So both sides are kind of playing with fire, and well, at least one of them is going to get very severely burnt. So now I'm waiting for Black's response. Oh, Black has a move. Tyson, how does Black get out of this? No, not like that. Oh my Lord. What was wrong with... Oh no, that didn't work either. Queen g4 didn't work. Yeah, no, he's just lost a piece. Okay, and now, if Black plays pawn takes pawn, tell me the best move for White. Because what do you want to do when you material up? Swap everything off. So, okay, so this is a... Yes, what would you do?
Oh no, I can't swap queens.
Yes, you can. Well, it's not forced. No, queen c6 check. If king takes queen, knight d4 check, and win the queen on f5. So queen to c6 check is putting your queen on the most... It's the nastiest move, right? Yeah. Well, let's hope that that doesn't happen. But this position in any sense... Oh no, don't allow it. And now queen to c6 check is devastating. If it gets... No, well, okay, there's a lot... Black's a pawn up. Black's a piece up. So lots of things are devastating, but queen to c6 check just immediately goes into a position that's just hopeless. Black would have to play king b8 or king a6 because he can't afford to swap queens. So it probably looks like 1-1 at the moment with 2 games going. So this game looks very safely in White's hand, although former world champions have said that all rook endings are drawn. I think that was more a joke than anything else, but a rook ending, if you're ever a pawn down in an ending, try to go for a rook ending, because there are the most number of possibilities to hold rook endings. With minor pieces, it's a lot tougher to hold. It would take me a few hours to explain why, but that's why these stupid sayings like all rook endings are drawn comes from. I think it was an old player called Tartakova, if my memory serves me right, but this rook ending is not one of those that's drawn simply because black's got too many weaknesses and white's got too many. My favorite plan is still to play rook to g3, and then if king f7, I'd like to sack a pawn back by playing d5, and after cd5, king to d5. And my main idea is to just, now that the king is on d5, I would just go back to c3 with the rook and take the 2 queenside pawns. Make sense? That's probably the easiest way to convert this, but so I'm not going to chalk that up as a win yet, because that's still requires some technique. But if there was a betting shop open, I'd put a bet on white winning at even quite long odds. This one, it's I'd put a sizable bet on white winning this one as well. Simply because it's an entire piece. The only thing that makes it slightly complicated is that there's still queens on the board and there's a potential for a passed pawn, but against a very seasoned tournament player, a very experienced tournament player, I think your chances are very low. And let's go to the most exciting game. And it has been the most exciting game for a while. And what's this? Okay, now this we've got to watch. Has something gone wrong? This is where we saw it last. Now rook to e6. Now black is planning to attack on the king side, and now I quite like black's position because rook is coming to g6 and knight's coming to f4. Let's see if that happened. Rook and a to d1 does not quite address the immediate issues. Yep. Rook g6. Queen h4, and this is starting to look extremely bad for white. And in fact, my first instinct would be to play knight f4 in this position, because that threatens a lot of stuff. But Henry has obviously calculated that queen f3 is also good, and queen f3 is also a very good move. Because the knight cannot come back to g3 to defend the g2 square, because then f2 is hanging, and if the g pawn moves to defend itself, just knight f4 wins, because then he won't be able to stop mate on g2. So it looks to me like this game is actually virtually over. So I do not see a defense in this position. I don't see a defense for white. Let me have a closer look. Well, queen g2 is a threat. The big problem is that the knight can't defend. The knight can't move to defend, because if it does, it can actually go to g5. In fact, that looks like the only move. Knight to g5. Okay. Rook to g5. Whoa. Queen to g5. That seems very ambitious. Queen to f2. What's the trick? Is it knight e3? No. What is the trick? Okay, I don't understand the trick now. Because after the king moves, now the knight will have to go somewhere. Yes?
I think he could play rook f3 in this position.
Well, rook f3, but the problem with rook f3 is what does it threaten?
Nothing.
That's a hassle. So it's a spectacular move, but it doesn't in fact have a threat. And in fact, in this position, black might be able to play something like knight. No, he can't play knight e3, knight f4. But knight f4 doesn't have a threat either. And this looks actually, this has suddenly turned very unpleasant, because unless he has a threat right now, we'll have the same situation as in the as on board 4, where one side is just the exchange down. Unless he can come up with something right now, right here, he's in deep trouble. He's just exchanged down. So he has to come up with a threat and some idea. Maybe chasing the queen away. The queen is rather disturbing in this square, but if it... knight f6, okay. I guess white will just play something like queen to d2 here, and black will have to rely on tricks alone now that the move queen f3 seems to have. So where did we... I think here black has a perfectly fine position, but the move queen f3, instead, if black builds up normally with knight f4 and doesn't try to be spectacular, it looks like black has a fine position. But this move, which superficially looks very, very good, is in fact a mistake because of knight g5. Blocking, now pawn takes queen is threatened, and queen takes h7 is threatened. So knight g5 was a very clever trick by Jason Chen. And black is forced to take on g5 and check, and now it's just he has a pawn for the exchange, but it's not enough. Yes?
After knight d5, shouldn't black just play queen f5?
Well, if he plays queen f5, then queen h7 is checkmate, because the rook is interfering in the defense. So that's knight g5 was one of those moves that just a complete position turner. Just turns the position from one side's to attacking to another side's attacking. And this is now very bad. Okay, time trouble coming, h6. That h6 is a very good defensive move. It stops back rank checkmates, because we had a back rank checkmate threatened here as well, because of bishop takes, and well, there's problems on the back rank anyway. Now there's less problems on the back rank, and the queen has to find a move. Mind you, if the queen goes to d2, black might be forced to swap queens, because otherwise, if black doesn't swap queens, bishop takes knight. So yeah, this position is, it's not lost yet, but it's a big advantage to white, because black only has one pawn for the exchange, and that's not enough. And Michael, let's see how Michael finished his opponent off here. Oh, f5. Well, that's a serious mistake. That's weakening your position for no good reason, and Michael now just takes everything, and he's really good at taking everything and queening pawns. It's a speciality. And here we go to the other side, and so okay, so it means that it's 2-0 to Churchy, but the other two games both look bad. So let's see what happened. Knight d4. Oh, so he missed queen c6 check. played knight d4 instead, which is very good, but it allows black to stop the immediate swap of queens. Oh, mind you, knight d4 is good. This is looking very nasty, and now knight d4. How will black survive? Bishop d6. Check. The king has to go to c8. Knight back to d4. Okay. He's not finding the best ways in this position. Probably bishop d4 would be quite good. Knight back to d4, king back to b8, and the knight goes over the other side. It's obvious that he does not want to draw.
Board 1, State High Course. On time already.
Oh, on time?
On time, yeah.
Okay.
Board 1 was on time.
So, the game that we were in trouble on. So, bishop c3. Sacrificing yet another piece. Let's see if that works. Takes. King takes now. White is 2 pieces down. Sorry, black is 2 pieces down. And for absolutely no compensation. And here we have, and the knight will come back to d4, I imagine, and well, 2 pieces are 2 pieces, so I think this game is gone.
Sorry, after the last 2 minutes, after the play.
Where?
So, queen c4, rook c2, and then queen e4, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I was thinking bishop takes b6 was playable.
It maybe, but I guess white is 2 pieces up. He wants to keep them both. And yep, keep that one. And knight e7, rook e8, rook c2. Now he wants to check. Knight c6 check again. King b2, and the knight goes back. Okay, so we have a position where white's just trying to convert 2 pieces. Now bishop b6 looks really deadly, doesn't it? Now bishop b6 and game over. Great technical game, Michael. Well done. Once you're a pawn up, I thought that was in the bag. So, okay, so there's Jason's game, and most of the games are now finished, and I have been told that in this game, white lost on time. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was winning there.
Sorry?
I was winning at the end there.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay, let's see how that happened, because when I last saw it in this position, you weren't.
Yeah.
And now, okay, queen h4, of course, queen d2, as we said. Once your material up, you should swap queens. Jason still thinks he's attacking. And now black gets a chance to activate his pieces. Bishop f5 and takes another pawn. And all of a sudden, the position has transformed yet again. White still thinks that he should be attacking where he should be swapping. And now black has complete control of the position, and the exchange doesn't matter anymore. Okay, that looks a little bit... I like to keep rooks, but you can't always go on... Everything's protected, but I'm a little bit nervous. Okay, again, you can't play moves like that. Because... And what does that threaten? Nothing. Oh! And in this position, according to reports, including by the player, white lost on time, but by now black's doing fine anyway. Move like knight f4 threatening checkmate would lose to... Oh no, it wouldn't lose to queen f8 because of knight g8.
Yeah, that's what he played in the weekend.
Oh, okay. So there were 2 more moves played, but we don't have them here. But black has well and truly recovered, and so we have 1 game still going. Don't tell us because we want to know.
He wants us to start the speeches.
Okay, and let's see and here bishop b6 as predicted was played. Bishop b5. Oh no! White missed bishop d4 discover check, winning. Oh, it doesn't win the queen because of queen. Oh yes, queen b5, rook b2. So white misses the discover check, winning the queen, and black manages to save himself in an ending. Not quite save, but not yet. So this game, did it continue? It was a draw. Well done. Well done. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, at this point we will leave our commentary because all the games have finished. This game was a 3.5 win to Churchy, although at some stages there were interesting positions on both boards. Thank you very much.
Take everyone over here for a goodbye speech.
And we're about to say goodbye. See you next